So we started talking about human resources. Let me get the slides. As part of business resources. So we're going to talk about three key areas: human, physical and technological, and financial. Okay. Well, we started talking about human resources the other day, so we want to continue with that. Any idea what this picture is? Any idea what this picture is about? What's going on here? What might that building be? What might that space be? Yeah, a bunch of people, obviously. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you couldn't possibly tell, right? So you couldn't possibly tell. So it's a trading floor. Okay. So we're going to kind of mix two of the elements. Actually, all three in this, you can see all three elements in one sense of what we're talking about in terms of business resources. It's a trading floor. And I want to say it's the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, but I'm not totally sure. It could be the Singapore. But it's obviously it's very hard to see any individuals and what they're doing and so on. But you can see they all have screens in front of them. Some of them two, some of them three. They're all looking at things. They're all doing things. It's a factory, for want of a better word, and it looks like a trading floor or some sort of trading desk. Okay, so I've never really understood what some of these funds businesses do. I mean, I know what they do. I mean, I know it's about investment. I know it's about, taking money in and investing money and trading it and trying to keep their portfolio levels up. And I know there's lots of governance and there's lots of processes underpinning and behind all that. But it never really appealed to me because they're not actually making something like a table or a chair or a bicycle or food or, operating on people or providing personal services. This is, stuff that's all done through computers and paper and so on. So for want of a better word, it is a type of factory. Okay. And in this factory, we have, these fundamental factors of production. We have people. All these people are sitting here at their desks. They're looking at screens. They're responding to prompts. They're making decisions. They're making phone calls. They're taking phone calls. They're dealing with emails. They're processing processes. And they're doing things, right? So we would ask ourselves, well, what is the job? And are there different jobs that they're doing? And who's required? And where would we hire them and what skills should they have, etc. Okay. And of course, they're using technology. So in this factory, the production line is the computer system. It's the way work flows and information flows through the computer system. And all of these terminals and screens and keyboards and mice and printers, they're all part of that system, aren't they? There will be systems, there will be processes. And so in this example, we see people who are using the equipment, the technology on their production line to do things. And these people have been hired, because of whatever reason they're hired or what skills they have to work in this space. And the third factor of production is the finance. It's the money. Think about it costs to set this up. I know these guys are trading money, but let's leave that aside. Think about what it costs to set this factory up. Think about what it costs to run this place. Think about the finance needed to get started. Okay. And I mean, I don't know how many people are in this picture. There could be 100, probably about 80 to 100 maybe in this picture. Maybe more. And if you think about it, if they're all earning on average, let's say $50,000, and of course they're not earning a lot more than that possibly, because it's financial services, they're being paid a lot of money every year. They're paid a lot of money every month. So where does that money come from? How does the system work? How does the equation work? So these are the things that we're interested in. Okay. How do we make it work? Now, the way to make it work is to start really, really small and to make this work, and then to make this work, and then to make something more work, and then to make it bigger work. But we'll deal with that under other modules as well. But these are the factors of production. So we're really concerned with human, technological, or physical resources and financial resources, and how we acquire them and how we use them within this core operational process. So the learning objectives we've been talking about are, we want you to know how human resources are managed, and we want you to describe how organizations select their employees and what documents are used in that. So we're going to be talking about this one today, and this idea of employability and skills. We're also going to be talking about understanding the process of managing physical and technological resources. So where do we get them? How do we use them? How do we make them work together, etc.? And how important are they? We want to talk about then how we get the money that we're going to have and we're going to need to use to run this business. And as part of that, we've got to understand the financial statements, the financial reports. Okay, so we'll be coming to that. So right now, we're still focused on our first resource, our people. And what I was saying the last day was, we talked about the fact that we've sort of finished up talking about the fact that on the top 10 places to work in the US a couple of years ago, three of the top 10, number one, number, I think, 3, and number 10, were not high tech, were not industry, were not financial services. They were low tech businesses in one sense. Now, I'm not saying, by the way, they're not using technology, because they are, but they are very much people dominated, people relationship focused businesses. Okay, so we talked about hotels and hospitality and grocery stores. Now, we might think grocery stores aren't really people-centered, but actually, it's all about, providing the right offering to the customer. And some of that is having the right people doing the work and engaging with, creating the right atmosphere in the store. I mean, who wants to shop in the store where everybody's rushing? You can't get a staff member, you can't ask a question, and people don't care about their work. So people are fundamental to what we're looking to do. Who wants to go to a hotel where, you're not really valued, you're not looked after? If I go to a hotel, I expect, I'm actually renting a safe, comfortable space for the night. I expect to be looked after. Okay, so that's what we're focused on. So one of the fundamental questions we have to talk about is, well, how do we get people? So to do that, we talked about this idea of investment in people and how much it costs. And what I wanted to do with this was just to show you that when we talk about people, it's not just about hiring somebody for today. The potential is, if we hire the right person and they stay with us over a number of years, it's going to cost us a fortune. We're going to be paying out a lot of money to somebody over their career. And that's not a bad thing. It is what it is. And that's just one person. So if we hire 10 people and we hire them at 25,000 euro, over 10 years, we're going to pay out 2.5 million to those 10 people if they're all on the same wage and there's no inflation whatsoever. Okay? If they stay 25 years, we're going to be talking about 7.5 million. Sorry, if they stay 25 years, we're going to be talking about we're going to be talking about nearly 14 million, okay? For 10, right? Now, obviously, not everybody stays the same length of time. Not everybody's paid the same amount of money. But it is a sizable commitment that we're looking to make, okay? A sizable commitment, right? So that's what we're investing in our people. So it makes sense that we put a lot of attention into, well, making sure that we get the right person, don't we? I mean, if you're buying a car, if you're buying okay, let's bring it closer to home. Let's say you're getting a new phone, right? Who got a new phone in the last 6 months? Anybody? No? Last year? Nobody got a phone the last year? What about a tablet? Did you get a phone that you like? Okay. Did you do a little bit of research, deciding what you wanted? Was there a little bit of haggling, trying to, get the right deal and so on? Of course. If you, I don't know if you have a brother or a sister, right? Particularly a younger brother or sister, they got their hands on it. Would you be, uh-oh, hold on, please don't touch my phone? Would that be happening? Or other people? Not really, no. Okay, all right. All right. If you, okay, but you don't want people messing with your phone, do you? Because you've invested in it. I don't mean just paid money in it. You've chosen it. You've made a decision. This is the phone I want, and it's my phone. Now, I'm not saying. I'm not saying, by the way, that it's everything. It's be all and everything. And a phone is just a commodity in many ways, but we tend to personalize it with the apps we use, with the photographs we take, and with the cover we put on it. We kind of make it our own, right? My point is that it's a simple little thing, but we do it, and it's part of who we are and what we want. It's become a little bit of we're identifying it as ours, and we're making it our own. Okay, good. So the reason I wanted to use that example is, if you think about it, you're making decisions about your phone, about what phone, about how to use it, about what cover you put on it, about who gets to handle it, who we share it with, how we use it. So, and yet it's just a small piece of technology, okay? Imagine if we were spending a lot more money on a person to work with us. We should actually be doing the same type of thing, shouldn't we? We should be making decisions about who we want to help and how we're going to make sure we get the right person. So we will be talking about this in another module, but from this point of view, it's important to understand, I suppose, the kind of process and the elements that we use, all right? So we're going to focus primarily on recruitment and selection. There's a lot more to human resources than just recruitment and selection. We're only really interested in this for this module because it's this idea of acquiring the resource. We understand why people are so important. Now it's, well, how do we get the right people? So something like what's on the right-hand side of the slide there, that's the model if you think about it, okay? We need to do this within some sort of framework. We need to consider what we want and why and what we're looking for, and make some decisions about making sure that we get what we want. So there's no point in us hiring a brain surgeon if what we really need is a car mechanic, okay? There's no point in us hiring an accountant if what we're really looking for is somebody who can work social media, okay? Now, I'm not saying that some accountants couldn't, but I'm saying, we just focus on the top level for the moment. So we need to make decisions about what we're looking for, the same way you make decisions about your phone. So if we're in an organization and we want our organization to do well, and we want to deliver the services that we're aiming to deliver, we want to provide the products where we think are necessary and for which we've identified there's a need, there are consumers, there are customers, we need to figure out the factors of production. And one of those is, what people do we need? What skills do we need? What's one of the fundamental groups of skills that are needed in the organization where you work? So most of the people in the organization who work there, what do they have to be able to do? So you're recruiting teachers because your core activity is teaching. Now, there are other things, and there are obviously different streams within the teaching, but they all have to be able to teach, don't they? So that's a fundamental thing, right? Now, the next thing is, well, it might be a math teacher, it might be an English language teacher, it might be physics. Then you're starting to dive into deeper levels. But there's that fundamental thing that, we need to figure out what we need and to go through a process to try and put that in place. So the process on the right really hints at where we're going in one of the other modules. So HR planning and personnel management action program. If you think about it, it's just thinking about what resources do we need. It's HR planning, human resource planning. It's thinking about what are we going to need And how are we going to meet that need? So it's about having processes around recruitment and selection. It's about having processes around remuneration, payroll. It's about having ways of dealing with grievances or disciplining staff. It's about managing holidays. It's about providing training, okay? It's not just recruitment and selection, but there's a whole range of other things we will be talking about. One of them is recruitment and selection. It's this idea of recruiting the right person for their job. Now, I should say there is a difference between recruitment and selection. Is there, well, how would you distinguish recruitment and selection? What does recruitment and selection mean? What does recruitment and selection mean? Get the right person for the job. That's what it's all about. To get to that stage, we need to get to that stage, we need to do a number of things to get the right person for the job. And that's where recruitment selection comes in. So recruitment, and I'm not saying that you don't break these down to smaller levels, but recruitment is actually quite different from selection. Recruitment is about getting as many people as possible to apply for the job, as many people as possible who can do the job to apply for the job, and from them to choose the best option, which is the selection. So recruitment is a different function. It feeds selection, but selection is quite a different process. So we talk about recruitment and selection a lot, but we need to be clear they're two separate processes. One leads into the other for sure, but they're two completely different things. Recruitment is like marketing, actually. It's about getting as many people as possible who can do the job to apply to do the job. And then it's about selecting from them the best fit for the organization. So we will be dealing with this in more detail. Now, recruitment, to get the right person for the job, it means that we really need to understand what the job is, what the needs are, and to use that to drive the recruitment and selection process. Okay? So when we talk about HR planning and personnel management, we're talking about this sort of framework within which all HR occurs. It's what do we want? What do we need our people to do? Well, at the top level, it's about implementing the strategy and achieving the objectives. But it's then about translating that down. We need people to do this. We need people to do that. We need people with these attitudes and with this culture. And we need to manage the culture in the organization. And we need to look at training and development. And we need to look at the long-term management and development of our people. Because if we're going to spend $1 million on somebody, we better get the best outcome out of that. So that's where the top level starts, right? And then as we start to drive down into that, well, the key part of that is making sure we hire the right people, the recruitment and selection piece. Then we need to make a decision about, well, what do we actually need? So before we recruit, we need to be clear about what do we want done? What do we want done? And that's the job analysis piece. So if you come down this ladder here, HR planning, right, then down to consider sociability as well as technical competence. So these are top levels, so let's not get too bogged down in these. We absolutely have to comply with legal requirements, certainly. But fundamentally, we have to get to this stage. We have to do job analysis. Now, what that means is when we think about the big picture, when we think about the type of organization we're looking to build, when we think about the laws that apply and the regulations that apply, and we look at the work that has to be done, we should be able to get to what we call a job description. Okay, so out of job analysis, we should get to a job description. The job description is a description of what we want somebody to do. And that's the starting point for our recruitment. Once we have a job description, then we can figure out, okay, we need somebody with this skill and that skill. Where are we likely to find them? Where are we likely to attract their attention? That shapes then how we do recruitment. So our job analysis piece is really, really crucial. And we're going to talk about how we do job analysis in a minute. But it helps us define and describe a job description and also a person specification. We'll look at an example in a minute. When we have that done, we can then start to look at attracting suitable applicants. And remember, this is just the recruitment stage. Attracting suitable applicants means we're telling people we're looking for somebody with these skills in this area, maybe with this language, with this level of experience to do this work. Right? That's what we put out there, don't we? When we go looking for somebody. And then we want only people who can meet those requirements to apply. What we don't want is hundreds of people applying who don't meet the requirements, because we're just going to say no, aren't we? We're just not going to hire them. If they don't meet the requirements that we absolutely need, it's wasting our time, isn't it? So we need to do this judiciously to make the system work efficiently. We need to be clear with people what we want, at the same time as casting a big enough net to get as many applicants as we can possibly do, but qualified applicants, applicants who can do the job, and from those to select some maybe for further analysis and engagement and interviews and so on, and from that to select, this is the person we really want. So Yenru, you're the person we really want. We're going to make you a job offer. Okay, that's what we want to get to, and that's the selection process. So recruitment is job analysis, job description, person specification, advertisement, getting it out there, getting people to apply, and then starting to filter. And then selection is filtering right down, maybe doing some interviews, maybe doing some tests, maybe another round of interviews, and choosing the candidate we want and offering that candidate the job. That's what the process is. So job analysis, attracting applicants, method of selection, you know, how we're going to judge between people, how we're going to assess and filter some of the applicants, maybe a selection interview, maybe another interview after that, by the way. We might talk about the interviewing style. So there are different types of interview. In most cases, many jobs, not everybody, most jobs, they might interview a few people to decide, okay, we want this person or we want that person, right? So it is a process. Okay, so we call that the selection interview or interviews. And out of that, there will be a decision made to make a job offer on the basis that, you know, here's what the job is. You've applied for the job. We've interviewed you. We think you can do the job. You've impressed us that you want to do the job. So we'd like to make a job offer to you. We think you're the best candidate. Hopefully you'll accept that job offer, and then we'll get you started. Right? That's the process, isn't it? So that's what this diagram is about. It's about those steps in the process. Now, not every business follows the same exact process, but the broad strokes are the same. They have to be, because most people who are most people who are hired are new to the organization, and that we don't know them necessarily that well. Now, in some cases, you know, we may know them, we may know of them, we may have had engagement with them, and we might think we really want them to join our organization, and that's fine. But in other cases, we're meeting people for the first time. We have to kind of get to know them and make a judgment on them, right? And that's why this process is so important. So the key elements are the job analysis, which helps us prepare for and then helps us attract applicants, and then a selection process to choose amongst those applicants, okay? Fundamentally, though, we do have to be clear there are things that we need. So let's say I'm going to open a pharmacy. Let's say we're going to open a pharmacy. What do we need in terms of people? Is it just a matter of going out and interviewing people? What do we actually need? You guys know what a pharmacy is? Yes, you're right. They need some sort of medical license, medical graduate. Yeah. So a pharmacy is like a chemist or a drugstore, as in where you go to buy your medicines that have been prescribed by your doctor. Okay. Is that how it works where you guys are? I know in Hanoi, I was in a pharmacy, actually was in a hospital in Vietnam. So yeah, seemed very normal. Not normal, it was what I expected, what we have. I presume it's a similar in most places, is it? Like in Spain, I've seen the same thing. So do you have stores where you go to buy medicine? Okay. So you're right. We need people with a graduate license. And what would that have to be? Would they have to be doctors? Not necessarily, but what should they be? Yeah, a pharmacist. Okay. pharmacist. Okay, so they have to understand. They have to know about drugs and chemicals, and they have to understand conditions. So there's a crossover between the medical side and between the chemist side, isn't there? The chemistry side. So that's what they need. That's the primary person. What else do we need? Maybe a nurse. You're right. You're right. Maybe a nurse or a nurse practitioner, because they know a bit more about helping people through issues, whether it's wounds or whether it's injuries or even coping with medicines and so on. I mean, I think nurses are actually quite undervalued, and certainly in Ireland, because the nurses are the ones who kind of understand how best to get people to do the right thing. A lot of our doctors aren't really good at that. What else would we need in our pharmacy? Would they be the only two things we need? Our pharmacists, are the ones who are specialists at dispensing medicines and so on, issuing out and so on. Yes, nurse practitioners can be part of that process, but we also probably need some retail experience, don't we? And we also need, you're right, medicine and other stocks, don't we? And we need furniture and fittings. And we need, we absolutely need some sort of systems for recording, don't we? I mean, everything has become so information rich, and regulated. We have to be able to show we're giving it the right medicines and so on. And we probably need some marketing expertise, including social media. All right. So there's a number of different things, but fundamentally, if you think about it, the top three all are about people. They're all about people skills, experience, capability. Okay. The other things we need as well, some of it's technology, some of it is enabled by finance, but that's what we actually need. Here's one I prepared earlier on. We'd be opening, for example, 8 to 8, 6 days, 72 hours. So we'd have to have 2 pharmacists on duty at any time, which means we probably need, okay, if you think about it, we're open 72 hours, 8 to 8, 6 days a week, which is 72 hours by 2 pharmacists, which means we need 144 hours of pharmacist coverage. Now, the problem with that is it's not an easy number to staff. So with 4 pharmacists, we'd probably get to 160 hours of coverage. With 3, we'd be at 120, would be less than we need. So we probably need to make sure we hire 4 pharmacists, or 4 whole-time equivalents. So it could be 5 pharmacists if 2 of them are job sharing. Because we probably need some element of overlap. We need to have 2 pharmacists on duty at all times, so that there's always a pharmacist in the store, potentially. I'm not sure if that's a regulation. I'm just imagining it is. And we need a bit of time for meetings and other things as well. So it probably makes sense for us to have 4 pharmacists. And even then, though, that doesn't necessarily account for holidays. So would our extra 16 hours a week give us enough time for holidays? I'm not sure it'd be enough for holidays for all of the staff. So we need to sort of look at that. So it's not just one person. Actually, we also need to start thinking about capacity, don't we? How many of them do we need? What sort of shift patterns? What sort of engagement do we need? How much, supervision do we need, etc. So there's lots of other things that start to feed into the equation as well. So we need to think about this on a number of different levels. Okay. The first process is job analysis. The first part is job analysis, which is when we talk about the job description and person specification. If I just go to here, this is an example. Actually, I'll tell you what, we'll look at an example in a second. We'll look at job analysis. It's this process we go through to arrive at a job description and a person specification. And if you think about it, here's the process. We know there's lots of different sources of information. Other employees, an employee we're replacing, for example. So Esther decides to get a much better job. She's leaving. So Esther's boss might say to Esther, okay, Esther, let's sit down and have a discussion about the work that you do so I can make sure I know what I'm hiring for to get your replacement. Okay. It might be other employees. It might be a supervisor. It might be, some process documentation that we have. It could be a job analyst that we get somebody specialized to come in and look at what's going on. One of my first consulting gigs was doing actually job analysis, was actually going in and figuring out what people were doing in this organization in these different roles so that we could actually build a training solution for them, okay, to do some sort of needs analysis. So using that information, we would collect that information from interviews, by looking at records, by looking at processes, by observing people, by maybe conducting a little bit of research, maybe by having survey questions going around. One of the ways that I used to do it was we used to tell people, listen, if it's a bank, how would you learn how a bank operated? Well, the best way to do it was, imagine you were stuck to a $5 note and you followed that note through the system. See who handled it, what they did with the note, where it went, how it was checked, when it was put here, etc. That you follow the product through the system. Same thing applies with a service. If you follow the service provision all the way through, you get an idea of what different people are doing. It's harder when, of course, it's all electronic, but the same idea applies. Why are you doing that? Where does it go next? What happens next? What do they do? Why do they do it? How do they do it? All of those are useful questions to help us gather that information, to help define the job, okay? What's the context for the job? What are the tasks that have to be done? What are the responsibilities? What skills are required? So you need to be able to stock shelves. So you need some manual dexterity. You need to be able to compute numbers. Okay, we tend to rely on spreadsheets for this, but we want you to have a head for numbers because we need you to be able to understand, report the numbers very, very quickly. You need to be able to speak Vietnamese. You need to be able to speak Mandarin. You need to be able to speak French, okay? Right, so what are the skills required? What are the capabilities required? So all of those are kind of functional linked. In addition, we might talk about, well, we want people who are this mindset, who have that mindset. So Esther, you work in a Christian school, so teachers probably have to be Christian, right? What else? So I work with NGOs, non-government organizations. So we look for people who have a service attitude, who want to do things for public goods. Okay, so we might look at some cultural or some behavioral issues. We might, of course, look at certain qualifications. We need a pharmacist, so you have to have your license. We need a heavy goods vehicle driver, so we need somebody with a HGV license, which is not just like driving a car, it's like driving a semi-articulated vehicle. We need people with experience using this equipment or that equipment, and so on. So once we do that sort of analysis, we're then able to write a job description and a personal specification, okay? And once we have that, now we can go do recruitment. All of this work is really, really important to get us to the stage where we know exactly what we want. Let's go see, can we find it? And that's when we might find something like this. So somebody pick a job. What job would you like to be doing? What job would anybody like? Translator. Okay. So where would you want to be a translator? In Vietnam? In Ireland? Anywhere? Let's just take government out of it. Let's just say translator and find jobs. Okay. So Irish translator. Oh, you don't want to be an Irish translator, trust me. German. So let's say an English translator, okay? Vietnamese, English to Vietnamese translator, okay? Okay, let's stick with Vietnamese. So language teacher Vietnamese in Dublin. I don't want it in Dublin. I want to do it in, let's say Singapore. Nope. Okay. I'm going to translate a job in Singapore. Oh my God. Okay, maybe Indeed.com isn't used as much in. Okay. My God, come on, seriously. Okay. Interpreter. 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 How do I spell that? Interpreter. Interpreter. Okay, I'm not getting anything here. Okay. Finally, Spanish linguist. Okay. Spanish translator for the Mogi group working in Dublin. Let's see. Here's what we see is some information on the job description about the organization, responsibilities to be able to translate and proofread text into Spanish, quality assurance on that, memory maintenance, translation memory maintenance, I don't know what that is, evaluating the work performance of interns, localization. Ideally, the candidate would have at least 1 to 2 years experience as a translator, a native level of Spanish with excellent oral and written skills, etc., etc., etc. So that's quite, it's not massive, but it's a reasonable job description. Let's see, bilingual IT software quality assurance in Cork. So we're looking for somebody with bilingual IT software quality assurance. So you need to be a software engineer. They're looking for people with these languages, not all of them, obviously. They're looking for people with these languages, with 1 or more of these languages. Here's the job, which is performing manual localization testing, etc., and so on. So let me just open up a new window. Right. So there we see some information about the job, which is what we're looking to do: perform manual localization testing. Analyzing international functionality issues to do with language, I'm sure. Designing, implementing, organizing manual test plans for testing software. You need to have language, you need strong analytical communication skills, be able to read software engineering, real-world software engineering experience. You've done some software programming and so on, okay? So that's a job description. That job description is arrived at after the process we've talked about, okay? If we go back, anybody else got a job they want to look at? What about teaching? In Indonesia? No. Okay. Translator. Okay, is Singapore Indeed.com. Freelance subtitler, game translator, personal assistant translator, game translator, personal assistant to the director. Aesthetic Medical International, $4,000 to $5,000 a month. So again, you see some of the information there laid out. An in-country translator, $200 a day. So some information about the organization, translation, online translation of general documents, meetings, and so on. So, okay, so, Asia Creative Writing, very good. Creative Writing Program call for visiting writers. There we go. Okay, so there's a number of different elements there. We're arriving at those using the job analysis process. So when we look at job analysis, we're looking to create some sort of job description. Like here, here's an example of a job description. Here's another one here for a British Council job in Dublin, Program Partnerships Manager. Some role information, the role purpose, and so on. I'm going to add this to the Google Classroom so you can look at it. But what we're really trying to do is to produce a document, a job description, right, and a personal specification. Document that gives information about the job, a blueprint of the ideal person to do the job, and the personal attributes and qualities associated. So the type of person we're looking for, okay? What attitudes, etc. All right, that's what we're looking for. And then we would go into some sort of interview process where we're looking to filter candidates who apply to that job, right, and to make decisions about who we would interview, etc. These headings: a business you're familiar with, identify a job role, and if you were hiring for that job role, what skills would somebody need to have? What knowledge would they have? What attitude would be useful for them to have? Okay, so put yourself in the position of being an employer. What do you think somebody in this organization needs when they're hiring somebody? So pick any business you're familiar with. It could be the store down the street, okay? Identify a job role in that store and tell me what are the skills, knowledge, and attitudes that that business might be looking for, okay? The thing about this, and what the learning objectives ask for is, how organizations select their employees and what documents are required. So we're going to talk about the documents. We talked about the process. We've talked about employability to a certain extent. Personal communication skills are so important in every role, which is that idea of the person specifications, not just the skills, it's the type of person that we're looking for. So if we were to talk about that, well, what sort of documents might help us with this process? Sorry, let's skip that one. We don't need that one. The documents which help us through this hiring process are, we need some sort of skills plan, skills audit. What skills do we have? How does that fit within our overall human resources plan? What's our strategy? What are we trying to do? So, because that shapes all decisions about who we need, etc. Then we need a job description. We absolutely have to get to a job description. We need a personal specification. What type of person are we looking to hire? Do we need somebody who's vivacious and outgoing and enthusiastic? Do we need somebody who's serious, who's quiet, who, is more observant? Do we need some combination of that? Do we need somebody who has the ability to get on with others? Do we need somebody who has the ability to translate concepts into, simple terms? What do we need? So what's the job description? What's the personal specification? What we should also have is our interview questions. Now, this might change interview to interview and role to role, but it gives us the ability to ask the same question to each candidate for this job at this time. Why might that be important? Well, if you think about it, when we interview several people for a job, we have to be able to choose amongst them. So having figured out our interview questions means we can then assess, well, how did they answer those questions? And, how did they do against these questions? I'm not saying it has to be linear necessarily, but it gives us some sort of capability to create candidate scoring sheets. In other words, here's why we like Esther for this job. Here's why we think Yenru was good at this job. Here's why we think we should be hiring Rana. Okay? What are the candidate scoring sheets based on the questions, based on the job description and the personal specification? How does the candidate match up against these things? And then ultimately we need an employment contract. Now, the things that help this process from the candidate side then are things like your cover letter or your CV or resume. So we should look at that, shouldn't we? You must have it. Okay, so if you think about it, though, when you apply for a job, do you just write a letter, or how do you tell the organization what you can do and why they should hire you. So here we would do that with a cover letter, and you had a meeting, yeah, but so they came to you. But how did they know you wanted a job? In most cases, how would that happen? I'm not saying, by the way, it can't happen, because of course it could be that, we think we need somebody to do this, and that absolutely that happens, and that's a great way in too, right? But otherwise, it might be, I'd like to work over there. I need to send them something so they know I want to work. I'd like to work in that job. In which case, it might be a cover letter and a resume or a CV. Okay. And that would help you express your interest in the job, as well as letting them know what you can do. Okay. So those are the elements that support the recruitment and selection process from the candidate side and from the employer side. And those are the pieces, those are the infrastructure elements, I guess, in particular the job description, the personal specification, which requires a job analysis that helps us get through that process. And the job description is about the skills and the things that have to be done, etc. But the personal specification, that's who we want. And that's, really, if you think about it, that's a description of the ideal candidate and their attitude and their communication skills, etc. So that enables us to sort of get the right people in place. And once we have the right people in place, then we need to talk about the other resources, the physical operational physical resources and the financial resources. So we'll pick up on the physical stuff tomorrow. All right? Okay. Have a good day, folks.